Welcome to Brazos Matters. I'm Jay Sokol. So I first hit the radio airwaves in Aggieland as a student in the late 1980s as a DJ, a part-time sports guy, and eventually a full-time news guy, which means I have either worked with or just met along the way a number of people who I would consider iconic voices in this community. So some examples are Scott DeLucia, Tom Tuberville, Chip Howard, Roger W. Garrett, Josh Halstead, Mike Fitch, Chase Murphy, Mary Mike Hatcher, Harold Presley, Katie Dempsey. I could go on and on. But the main figure in that Mount Rushmore of voices is Dave South. So iconic that his nickname is the voice of Aggieland. So Dave was the voice of Texas A&M football, basketball, and baseball for more than 30 years, officially retiring from play-by-play, I believe, when the world stopped during the pandemic. So I asked Dave to talk about his career in radio, his most cherished moments calling games, and a whole lot more, because the voice of Aggieland somehow marks his 80th birthday this year. Big deal. So Dave, thanks for being here. How are you?
Well, thanks, Jay, for inviting me. I've always been a fan of yours too.
Well, it's nice of you to say. Now, in years gone by, if I said, Dave, how are you?
I'm the best I've ever been.
You said that so much, and that was just part of your brand.
Yeah.
But then you stopped.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, what I say now when somebody asks me, how are you doing? I always go, I'm thankful and I'm fearless.
Okay.
The thankful came from a Billy Graham devotional I had read, and that was thankful. And so when people would ask me how I was doing, I'd go, I'm thankful, and they would look at me and go, what are you thankful for? And I said, I'm thankful for Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And so then the next part of that was I'm fearless. Rick Warren is somebody who wrote a book, by the way, that Purpose-Driven Life. And I read that book, and it had a great meaning in my life. Rick, he had a son that committed suicide, and people started attacking him, saying, you're probably not the minister you say you are, which I thought was rather rude. And then he said, you know what, I wasn't going to let that bother me. I was going to be fearless to those kinds of comments. Yeah. And so that's when 365 times in the Bible it says, fear not. So that's the second half of it. And so there are some people, when I see them, they'll say, you're still the best you've ever been. Well, yeah, I am, but here's the next part of that. And it did get around. There was a coach that left here and was coaching with the Buffalo Bills. And I called up there one day to talk to the trainer for the Buffalo Bills, who was a guy that I knew, and I wanted to visit with him about something. And before I hung up, the receptionist, I said, do you ever see Cully? And does he come around, across your desk, around your desk? And she said, yeah, I'll see him today when he comes back for lunch. And I said, well, when he walks by, and he'll probably ask you how you're doing, you just say, I'm the best I've ever been. And so she said, okay, I'll do it. And later that afternoon, he called me because he walked by and she said that, and he turned around and looked at her. Do you know Dave South? And so anyway, so now I dropped it and went the other way.
That's a good story, though.
Yeah.
So in reading up on you, I learned how you fell in love with radio, and then how that turned into KDAV radio.
Yeah.
Would you tell that story?
Back when I was growing up, the stores closed at 5 o'clock every night except one, and that was Thursday nights. And they stayed open until 9.
Okay.
And so my dad, he got a half a day off on Thursdays. We'd come home and eat, and then we would go downtown Wichita Falls, and we would stay down there until all the stores closed. And I didn't want to go, into shopping with my mother or my dad. And there was a radio station on the streets, that on the main, Scott Street in Wichita Falls. And I went over there and started standing in front of the window. You could look in and see the disc jockey. And it turned out to be somebody very famous. You can look this guy's name up. You can Google him. His name was Snuff Garrett, but his given name was Tommy Garrett. And I would stand and watch Snuff work. I was 10 years old. And I would be down there every Thursday night just staring at him. And I'm sure he was kind of feeling a little uneasy. Who is this kid? Why is he looking at me? And so finally one night he said, he had a speaker we could talk to, and he said, I'm going to buzz you in. Come to the door. So I went around, and he buzzed me in, and I went into the control room. And Snuff said, "What? Every Thursday night you're here. What's going on?" And I said, "Well, my parents are shopping, and I just like to watch what you're doing. I think it's kind of interesting." And he said, "Well, from now on, just let me know you're there and tap on the window, and you can come in and sit with me." And he did. He started giving me news copy. He gave me actual copy, commercial copy. He'd give all that stuff. And he explained everything that he was doing, the control board, the record players, the turntables, and the whole works. And I was just blown away by that.
You remember this?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like it's yesterday.
Wow.
Because it had that much of an impact on me. And Snuff Garrett was really famous in Wichita Falls. He was very close friends with Buddy Holly. And when Buddy was killed in that plane crash in 1959, he did like an entire night. He talked to a lot of people that knew Buddy. Well, it was the next night. But he knew a lot of people because he was from Lubbock, and that's where he had met Buddy.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I decided there was a comment from Mark Twain, and he said the two most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. And I guess I found out why those nights when I was watching Snuff Garrett work as a disc jockey, I decided I wanted to be a radio announcer.
Wow.
And now that some time had gone by the time I was 12 years old, I was still going down there and watching Snuff. And that was about the time he left, because he did leave and went to Hollywood and became a big-time record producer. But I decided I want to be a disc jockey. Had a paper route, saved up my money. I went and bought 2 reel-to-reel recorders. I bought a little makeshift board. I had 2 turntables. I wired all of that together. I would go into half of my closet was a radio station. I moved all my clothes to the other side of my closet.
Great sound inside a closet.
Yeah, I'll say. And so anyway, I started practicing being a DJ, and my mother would come in after I got through, and she would listen to my tapes, and she would correct my enunciations, and you don't need to say it that way. I'm going to help you with your English here, son.
Wow. And
so she did, and some of my friends would come over, and they'd be guests on my radio show. KDAV. We would sit in my little closet and we would talk. And so that went on for quite some time, even after I got into junior high and leading into my sophomore year in high school. And so I was working at the A&P at that time as a sack boy. And she said, "I'm going to pick you up tonight when you get off. What time do you get off?" And I said, 4 o'clock, and this was in the summertime. And she said, "Okay, I'm going to pick you up. What are we going to do? You'll know when I take you there." So we went out to the radio station. She found out where this radio station. It was the same station that Snuff had worked for. Mm-hmm. And now they were out on a hill out by the TV station. And pulled up, and I said, "What are we doing here?" And she said, "You're going to go in there and apply for a job." "No, I'm not. I'm not about to go in there." And she said, "Yes, you are, because I think you're ready. And I think if you'll go in there and they'll give you an opportunity to read for them, they'll hire you." And I said, "What do you think?" "Because you've got a great voice." My voice had started to change when I was about 13 years old. Now I'm 50, and people would call the house, and I would answer the phone, and they would go, "Is your wife there?" "No, but my mother is. You want to talk to her?" And so my voice had changed, and we were sitting there, and it's getting close, and she finally said, "We're not going until you go in." So I go inside, and everybody was gone except for one guy. And this guy, later on, I would hear him on WBAP. Guy's name was Mike Hoy.
Okay.
And Hoy. And I walked in, he said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Well, I want to apply for a job." He kind of looked at me, and he said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah." And he said, "You have any experience?" Well, I wasn't going to tell him I was, a closet DJ. I was going to leave
literally a closet DJ.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that. And he said, "Okay." So we go into a recording studio. Had the big old Ampex reel-to-reel record. Remember those?
Yeah.
He told me how to start and stop it. And so he left me alone, gave me some stuff to read. And I sat in there, and I practiced, and then I did it. And so he came back in, I stopped it, and he came back in, and he said, I'll get a chance, I'll listen to it. And he started to rewind it, and he was not going to listen to that. And suddenly he just stopped, and he said, "You know what, I got time." He looked at his watch, and he listened to it a little bit. Then he went, "Where have you worked before?" And I said, "Not in my closet." I didn't say that either. I don't have any experience. I've taken a lot of speech classes, and I guess that has something to do with it. He said, "I think we can use you. I'm going to hire you as a weekend guy. I'm serious. We need a weekend guy right now.
And you were about 15?
I was 15 years old. Didn't have a Social Security card, and he kind of let that slide for a while until I turned 16 in August of that summer.
Yeah.
And anyway.
So it's interesting to me that your mom not only embraced it, she drove you to the station so you could apply for this job.
Yes. Yeah.
So you get the job at the station, and then what?
They immediately changed my name. It wasn't Dave South. It was Jim Miller and the Night Satellite. And I don't know where they came up with that. They had crazy names like that back in those days.
How long were you Jim Miller?
Quite a while,
Yeah.
because we started. Now Snuff, by the way, had left by then, and I eventually took over the slot that he worked from 9 to 12:30.
Wow.
And that was quite an honor for me because, that's Snuff Garrett. And you ought to Google him because, man, he was very successful. He produced records for Cher, Bobby V, Johnny Burnett. It just went on and on.
Wow.
Then he recorded some albums called Tommy Garrett's 50 Pianos, Tommy Garrett's 50 Guitars. And those were big sellers. The guy was a multimillionaire by the time that he retired.
So you start out as a DJ,
Mm-hmm.
and at what point did you start sort of testing the waters in play-by-play? Like that's a real pivot.
I volunteered to work with the guy that was doing the play-by-play for Wichita Falls High School when I got the job that summer, and he hired me to go and do stats for him, and actually ended up talking on the air and ended up doing some games that year, and then also some basketball games, and continue to do that for quite some time.
It's
all in Wichita Falls.
Play-by-play or color?
Play-by-play,
Wow.
and also color.
Okay.
But I was doing both. If somebody, didn't, they were having a hard time trying to find any play-by-play men. Now then, let's go back before all of this.
Sure.
Because I fell in love with baseball at the age of 7. And I just loved the sport. But when I was 10 years old, my dad took me down to the Sputter Ballpark. They had a farm team there of the Dodgers,
Okay.
Wichita Falls Sputters, and went down there. And that night, first game ever at Old Sputter Park, and I ended up playing baseball there. But I was sitting there, and I looked down at the far end of the bench of the stands, way down the right field line. There was some old bleachers, and all of the black people were sitting down there. And I looked back at my dad, and I said, why can't they sit up here with us?
Yeah.
Well, there were a bunch of men. I'll never forget, there's a bunch of men, white guys, sitting in front of us. They all turned around and looked at me and then looked at my dad. And he's looking back at them, and he goes, we'll talk about it when we get home. And so when we got home, he said, I want you to go to the library and look up Jackie Robinson. And so I went and I found out about Jackie Robinson and everything that he went through to get into baseball. Well, anyway, that was one of the stories there. But I started, when I started first at 10 years old, I started, the coach of this Little League team had given me a score pad, and I made my own scorebook. And I would watch the game of the day on the weekends with Pee Wee Reese and Dizzy Dean, and I would score it. And then I would go sit in the window of my bedroom looking out over the backyard, and I would recreate that game. And that's how I got the play-by-play thing going. And the only thing that could hear me was my dog, Ren 1010, and he was right outside the window, and he would lay there below the window listening to me. And
So when I was starting to get into the news business, and I was young, in fact, I started learning at WBAB when I was in college. Wow. If you remember the name Joe Halstead.
Oh, yeah.
Joe was one of the guys who was nice enough to start showing me the ropes there. But I picked a couple of people to try to emulate because I didn't have a sound and I didn't have my own direction yet. And so my idols it was kind of a combination of Peter Jennings and Paul Harvey, right? Because I loved the way they sounded and the kinds of stories that they told. Who were the iconic voices that maybe were the North Star for you?
Well, I ended up, as you probably know, in Waco after I got out of school, and Frank Fallon.
Yeah.
Frank Fallon was a great teacher, and I've said before very publicly that the reason I'm doing what I'm doing today is because of Frank Fallon. And anything that I do well, it's because of Frank Fallon. anything that I'm not doing well, it's because I didn't listen good enough to Frank.
Really?
And so because I thought Frank was Frank could have worked anywhere he wanted to. The Astros tried to hire him. He did the Houston Oilers for a long time, and Cowboys used him a number of times on preseason games. But Frank was just a pro, and I could watch everything. He was meticulous about his preparation and the whole works. So you had the opportunity to work with a pro like that.
Going to take a quick break to reset. If you just tuned in, I'm Jay Sokol. You're listening to Brazos Matters, and our guest today is the voice of Aggieland, Dave South. We're talking about radio and his legendary play-by-play career for Texas A&M sports. Okay, so how did you make your way to Bryan College Station, Texas A&M?
Well, I ended up, Frank, the old Southwest Conference Radio Network. They were looking for people, and Frank recommended me, and so I got an audition, and I was in the right place at the right time, said the right thing to the right person, and they hired me. And so I started working with the old Exxon Radio Network. It was Exxon then, and that started my career there. And then Frank and I worked a lot. We did some Baylor games together. Frank and I we did Little League Baseball. We did everything you can imagine. And so that's probably got me started in the right direction. I did my first college broadcast in 1970. And then when I retired from baseball here at A&M I guess that was in 2020.
Right.
And that had been 50 years. That I had done all of those games. I worked 4 years doing NBA games. I ended up with a network that did the NBA game of the night. And so that was a good experience to a point, and I was traveling too much.
Yeah.
And so I just finally stepped back from that totally. But anyway, and I've looked back, and I've been to all kinds of places, met all sorts of people. Especially in the sports field, but then working at KWTX and Channel 10 up there, met a lot of folks that were away from sports. I had an opportunity one time to interview Dolly Parton. It was the nicest people I ever met in my life, just as nice as she could be. She gave me about 15 minutes of her time because I loaned her my guitar.
Really?
Because she was about to go on TV, and she wanted to sing a song. She said, "Can I borrow your guitar?" And I said, "Would you give me an interview when we get through?" And she did. But just people like that, down through the years. And I also met some people that I just as soon forget.
So I've seen a list of what's considered to be your most memorable play-by-play moments, your biggest calls.
Yeah.
And I think they were all Aggie football, and they were all iconic. But I'm wondering if you would say those were the moments that you remember the most. Because I'm curious what those might be.
No, just those. People have asked me what was the game that you remember more than any other, and it was the bonfire game.
Yeah.
We needed to win that game that afternoon because we were all hurting here. We needed something to make us feel better. Not that you can feel great about the loss of 12 students, but. I would say that game that night, and then some of the success we had in basketball, and then going to the College World Series. To me, those are the best teams A&M ever had, and any time that a team qualifies for the College World Series, that's one of their best teams, if not the best team. We didn't win any of those, and of course we went last year, as you and I are talking, and that didn't work out for us.
Yeah. Things that stand out, the list that is associated with your biggest calls in football. There's Kansas State 1998, Texas in 99, a couple of Oklahoma games, an Alabama game. I think about things like A.C. Law's buzzer beater against Texas, and John Byington's home runs against Texas. There have been so many iconic moments that I think you've been a part of.
Just dozens and dozens of them. I mean, you think back, and after a while, you can't remember exactly what year that was when that happened because there have been so many of those. And then the other thing too is that I got real close to the athletes and the coaches, and here's what I truly believe. I think I lasted as long as I did, okay, because the coaches that I talked to and worked with knew they could trust me.
Sure.
I never did or said anything derogatory about any coach on the air that I worked with, and that got back to them. And so that was, and I would never, ever, they were amateurs then. Well, of course, you're getting paid now, but I would not criticize a young man down. He's trying the best he can do down there,
Sure,
on that field or whatever we're doing on the court. But I think that lasted that long just simply because those coaches knew they could trust me.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you that there is a story, and I'm not going to tell you who it was,
okay,
because it's pretty hilarious. There was a point in one of the networks. I'm not sure if it was Exxon or not, but we had to interview the two coaches, and I had gone to Little Rock to do a Arkansas and the other team game. I'll tell you who that was.
Okay.
All right. So I went to Lou Holtz's hotel, interviewed him, went across town to the other hotel, and knocked on the door, and the coach answered the door. And he was about 3 sheets to the wind.
Okay.
And so I said, well, I'm not going to do an interview here tonight. So I just said the coach wasn't available on the air the next day. And he started talking, and I truly, this is what that example of what I'm talking about, when they knew they could trust me. This guy started talking, and he started telling me about everything that was going on in the Southwest Conference, all of the cheating and everything. I mean, it just went on and on. He talked for about a half hour longer, telling me this is what this team does, this is what this team does, and just went on and on. And he named every team in the league except his. And so I looked at him and I said, so you're telling me you guys don't cheat? And a great line, he went, oh, no, we cheat. But what can you do with $100? So,
nice.
Anyway, but I would never, ever reveal who that was. Or I just didn't. That wasn't right. I mean, they talked to me. Every coach I've ever worked with has said something that if I wanted to, I would have put in that book, and I could have heard him. I wasn't going to do that even after I retired.
Yeah.
And I think that's the reason a lot of sports people nowadays have trouble, because they think the coach ought to like him. Well, you just said that he was the worst coach you ever saw in your life.
So can you listen to a game or watch a game like a normal person, or are you sort of paying too much attention to the play-by-play
I turn it
person?
down. I turn it down.
Do you really?
Yeah, I just watch. I watch it on TV. I heard Granger Smith talked at our church. We had a men's stakeout, and one of the things he said that night, I don't know, Granger. I'm not sure. He has 3 children, and he was supposed to be watching all 3. And he wasn't watching the smallest, and he went into the backyard and got in the swimming pool, and he drowned.
Yes.
And so he, that night, he said he wanted to get away from the country music. Got pretty serious for him. And he said, I prayed to God that he would take my passion for country music away from me. And now he's going to the seminary in Fort Worth, and he's going to become a pastor.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he is. And so for me, I said, Lord, I want to retire and I want to move on to other things. So take my passion away from me for sports. And he's done that. He really has. I'm still a Dodger fan. I'll check the scores, and I still check the scores for Texas A&M in football, basketball, and baseball.
Okay.
I go online, and I want them to win. But, a lot of people don't realize for 50 years, even during the summer, I didn't have time off because I felt compelled to go talk to Aggie groups who were asking me to come and speak to them.
Sure.
And so I would do that. But you never got a break. You were doing something all the time. And even in preparation for a game, I had 2 jobs at A&M. I was also in charge of all of our corporate sales. I was bringing sponsorships in at the same time I was doing those games. Yeah. So I was doing sales in the daytime, and I was working doing my play-by-play, getting that ready at night. And I can remember one time, Jay, that I was on a plane Christmas morning flying to a basketball game. And I was missing anniversaries, birthdays. I missed my oldest son's first home run because I was off speaking to somebody. Wow. You know what? So I just decided I'm going to move on. I said to somebody at church not too long ago, he said, what'd you think about the game yesterday? And I said, well, I really didn't see it. And he said, why not? And I said, well, I don't watch those games anymore. And he made a comment. He said, maybe you didn't love it as much as you did, or you thought you did. And I said, no, that's not it at all. And then I looked, and there's a gentleman over there. I said, do you see that guy? And I told him who it was. And he said, do you know what he does? And he said, no. And I said, he's our lawyer, but he's retired now. Do you think he gets up every morning and goes down to the courthouse and sits through court sessions?
Right.
No, he doesn't. And so that's with me. I've got other things I want to do now, and I'm doing that. I'm a volunteer now at Meals on Wheels.
Yeah.
I'm marshalling out at the campus golf course with some guys who all worked at Texas A&M, and it's meeting a lot of people that I've known, just finding other things to do. We're active with our church. We're just, things that are important to me now at this point in time in my life.
I imagine, because you do a radio show for us,
Yeah.
50s and 60s rock and roll with Dave South on
Yeah.
KAMU-FM. Radio is one of those things I think that gets into your blood and it never quite lets go.
Yeah.
And so you're still doing a version of what you did in your closet
Yes,
as a
I am.
kid.
Yeah, I am.
You want to give your show a quick plug?
Well, we do. It's about 1955 to about 1969. It started to move away from rock and roll in the late 60s, and there's some of that music I just don't like. But we are on 5 o'clock on Saturdays and 12 noon on Sundays. He's streaming it now. The most recent show you can pick up. I was getting ready to retire. Jim Hawthorne, who did the LSU games, was there, and that was his last year. And I said, "What are you going to do?" And he said, "The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take my wife on a around the world cruise, because your wife's like my wife. She got left at home all the time.
Yeah.
And what are you going to do when you get back?" He said, "I've got a radio station in Baton Rouge going to give me 2 hours every Sunday night. I was a disc jockey in high school and college, and I want to be a disc jockey again." And he, as far as I know, he's still doing that. And so that's what started all of that. I asked KAMU, and they said yes. And so I think we're 365 or 66 shows now.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow. And I love the fact that, yes, you can catch your show Saturdays at 5 or Sundays at noon, but yes, you can go to your favorite podcast platform or to the KAMU website and catch the latest show.
I appreciate KAMU letting me have that, because I've had fun doing that like you wouldn't believe. Internet provides a lot of information that when I was disc jockeying back in Wichita Falls, you didn't have that information.
Right.
Now you've got it. You can find out a lot of things about some of these people that you played their records and played their music, and some of them I've ended up meeting down through the years.
We have barely scratched the surface about your career, about your love of radio, but I am so appreciative that you came here, because you didn't go to school at A&M, I don't believe.
No, I went to Midwestern Wichita Falls.
But you are part of the fabric of this community.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I was blessed to get. I had actually retired in 1984. I was a general manager of a radio station, and I decided I was just going to concentrate on that. A&M called and asked if I'd come down for 1 year, because they had the guy lined up, and they said, and I said, "Okay, for 1 year, then I'm leaving," and that turned into 30 plus.
The voice of Aggieland, Dave South. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for asking.
Of course. Brazos Matters is a production of Aggieland's Public Radio 90.9 KAMU-FM, a member of Texas A&M University's Division of Marketing and Communications. Our show is engineered and edited by Matt Dipman. All Brazos Matters episodes are available on YouTube and on your favorite podcast platform. Also on the NPR app and the KAMU website. Thank you so much for listening or for watching. I'm Jay Sokol. Hope you have a wonderful day.